So now formally open the meeting. Okay, members. So we're formally open. Could I welcome everybody this morning to the Social Development Committee. Just remind members that all the protocols around the use of electronic tablets and telephones and so on. I'll ask anybody in the room to switch those electronic devices off, please. And could I ask members to declare any interests which are relevant to the issues being discussed at today's meeting? And there are none being declared that I can see here. Then moving on then to apologies. I have apologies received from Stuart Dixon and Michael Copeland. Any other apologies to record? None other. Let me move on then. Just chairperson's business, just I think one item. That's just to advise the committee that the OFM committee, sorry I'm moving too quickly, moving to the minutes of the draft minutes of the last meeting on the 9th of October. Members content to agree the minutes for accuracy? Okay, members agreed, thank you for that. Then moving on to chairperson's business, just to say that the OFM-DFM committee have invited us to attend an informal briefing with the Italian ambassador to the UK and the Italian Consul General on Monday the 20th of October here in Parliament Buildings. This is an invitation to all chairs of all statutory committees, and I haven't had a chance to look at that, but the committee will be represented one way or the other. Okay, so matters arising. Just to remind members that next week's meeting will be held at the offices of the Housing Rights Services on High Street, Belfast. The meeting has been kept relatively short in terms of briefings and so on, and that's just to allow the committee, as we recall, to meet informally with representatives from the Housing Rights Services Private Tenants Forum, and the Tenants Forum will be providing a short briefing paper for members in advance of that next week. Just to note that, and an agenda for that particular day is included at page 12 of your packs. Lunch will be provided by the Housing Rights Service, and members will be provided with additional relevant information in the next week's briefing pack, which relates to Wi-Fi codes and nearby parking and so on. We're advised that members should make their own way to the venue, and the meeting will start at 10 a.m. as usual. Members have any other queries, please contact some of the committee staff here. And a number of apologies, I'm advised, have already been received for that meeting scheduled for the 23rd of October, due to members having other commitments. So if any other members are not able to attend, could they please indicate so as that we can advise the Housing Rights Service of an anticipated attendance figures, just for their own preparations. Okay, so I'm not hearing all of you.
It's next week.
Yeah.
I'll not be able to attend. I'm representing the ARC committee at an event in the Long Gallery next Thursday.
Okay, duly noted then, thank you for that. Okay, and then further to that, then the Housing Rights Service will hold a conference on the 6th of November. 2 members of the committee have already agreed to attend this conference as part of a panel discussion. Don't know who, do you know the...
Fran McCann, Stuart Dixon.
So Stuart Dixon and Fran McCann are both going. I think the service wanted to have members from the parties on the panel, so members could endeavour to indicate whether they're able to attend it or not. That would just allow the Housing Rights Service to be able to prepare properly for that event. Could you please maybe do that with the committee officials here, please, as soon as possible. Okay, I'm just advising members that we will break for lunch after this morning's inquiry session. People have already been made aware that Mr. Brentford needs to leave at midday. So if the session goes to 12, then we will resume at 12:30 to take a departmental briefing on the review of social housing allocations, and then this will be followed by a legal briefing, which was on the legal advice that we sought on the fact-finding exercise and the ability of the committee to get sight of that, and we'll deal with that in closed session later. And just to remind people that the legal advice provided by the Assembly Legal Services is categorised as privileged and as such should not go beyond the committee, which is the intended recipient of the advice. Moving on, and next item on matters arising, you will note that additional written evidence has now been received from the BBC. This was delivered in hard copy on Tuesday, Only one copy of the documentation has been provided to us. The committee members, you'll know you've received the raw information yesterday in the electronic format, as that was received from the BBC, and the full copy of the evidence is also available on the ECP system, whatever that is. What's the ECP system?
It's just the electronic system that you can do everything delivered on.
Very good. Okay, thank you for that. But the officials here have reviewed all that information received from the BBC, and they've identified information which is relevant and needs to be included in the inquiry packs provided at the meeting. The BBC has withheld some evidence which was provided to them on a confidential basis, or which they assert the committee ought to have obtained elsewhere. Was it just to note that this is evidence that the committee may well have already obtained in its search for evidence. So we just need to deal with that in terms of establishing what we've received from them. Do we already have that? Is there anything that we haven't received from them that we don't already have? Maybe, Kevin, you want to maybe speak on that for a moment or so?
No, Chair, members will note that there's several hundred pages of documentation that came through electronically, that we provided electronically. I think much of we didn't see that much of it was particularly pertinent to the key issues in respect of the inquiry. Some of the information we actually do already have. That's responses to some of the letters which were at the front of the BBC documentation. So, for example, we had responses from the department from Will Hare in relation to the BBC. So it's there. But members, we just asked members if they could go through that and see if there's any information that they need us to follow up on. There's information that they feel is relevant that we haven't included in the packs. As I say, it's perhaps easy to look over some stuff or overlook some stuff, but we think that we've done a reasonable job on that, and that anything that is relevant is in the pack.
Gregory?
Yeah, Chairman, in accompanying that, it was quite comprehensive. I haven't gone through it all yet, but did the BBC say, in context of that or any other additional correspondence they've had about if they have reconsidered their decision about not appearing in front of the committee?
No, essentially.
No, we have no more further communication on that.
Right. So, in coverage of last week's event, I noticed the BBC did cover it in their evening news bulletin. And they also read out a statement which I don't think the committee were furnished with. It was a statement which indicated about the BBC's desire to fully cooperate with the committee. For brass neck, that takes some beating from the BBC. They said they fully cooperate with this committee. They've done anything but, and now we've got a litany of papers. And as I say, I haven't gone through them all, but the vast bulk of them don't seem to be to throw any fresh light on our investigations. And the more important issue is that they should be like others here. They're good at asking questions. They're not very good at answering them. So I think we've got to press this on. Are they going to come or are they not?
Could I ask, have we expressly asked them to come to this phase?
The committee took the same approach as it did in phase one, which was to ask for any additional information that the BBC might have that we don't have, and they have now provided that. I don't believe there was an express invitation to the committee to
So the
BBC.
production of the paperwork is the first step, then we would then, if we wish, ask them to come.
Yes, subsequent to consideration of in detail of the papers that they have provided.
Should we not now be asking them to come?
Well, I think the legal advice we had initially was that we needed to make sure that we had acquired all of the information that we needed from the BBC, that we hadn't from any other source received or acquired. And then on that basis, if there was anything then left outstanding that the BBC would need to shed light on, if they were prepared to do so, then we would be on better ground to ask. And that's a summary of what the legal advice, Jim, was. You remember that. So that is the way in which we've been operating. And I think at the last phase, when we looked at the evidence and the information that we had received from them, we had accumulated all the information that the committee felt was necessary. so we then didn't pursue that. But it's open to this committee at any time if we feel that we still don't have enough information, BBC are withholding information for whatever grounds they cite, then it's up to this committee then to, if we want to ask them to come along to do that formally. But I think it would be a safer ground to do that if we have established going through the documentation that we receive from them, is there something missing or is there a deficit in that we do really need to explore with them directly. My impression of the legal advice that we received earlier on to this committee was that that's a ground that we would need to be sure about, if you know what I mean. So,
in keeping with that legal advice, Chairman, then, can we do what needs to be done by next week, and then if we require them here, which I think we do, we then extend the invite yet again for them to come here and answer some questions?
I mean, I take your point, because we've had like a standing kind of invite anyway, so it's not as if we didn't ask them to be here initially. We did.
But that standing invite has been declined constantly.
Oh yeah, it has been, yeah. So I think that's what we need to do, really. We need to just peruse through the material that we've now received, and between ourselves as members and the officials here, we look and see if there's anything that we think there's a deficit in regard to information, and then on that basis then ask the BBC. I think that probably is the most prudent approach. So our members content in that we do that. We come back next week and have the discussion as to whether or not we want to invite the BBC back.
Will our location next week be okay to allow us to do that?
Oh, well, that's another thing, maybe.
Chair, there's no problem at all with doing that. I would just highlight the fact that there will be at least 4 members who have given their apologies for next week.
We could do it the following week. That maybe be more prudent, because if we're doing a meeting in another venue next week, we'd have to go into closed session, I presume. Well,
not necessarily, Chair. But the other point is, of course, that we're in Halloween recess. So the meeting following next week will be the 6th of November. Chair, members will...
Well, we can't do it next week because it's not a closed...
It's not a closed session. If there'll still be, as long as there's a quorum next week and members feel that they would want to ask the BBC to appear, then that is perfectly within the remit of the committee to do so.
I mean, at the end of the day, the committee has always been of a mind to invite the BBC, and we've expressed that we'd want to see them here. Okay, then, so we'll between the members and the officials, then we'll try and go through the documentation that we've now received and to establish on what basis, if any, that we want to invite the BBC formally back again. Okay, members, thank you for another item in respect of this inquiry that the committee had agreed on the 2nd of October to write to Frank Cushnahan seeking clarity on the respect of some comments which were attributed to him by Paddy McIntyre, from the former Chief Executive of the Housing Executive. Mr. Cushnahan has replied, and this is on page 3 of your tabled items, and he's expressed dissatisfaction at the fact that the letter which was sent to him was forwarded to him via NAMA, which he no longer sits on their advisory committee. So we take exception to the manner in which the committee officials contacted him. Their last known contact with him was through NAMA, and officials here had contacted them, and they were quite prepared to forward on the correspondence to Frank Cushnahan. Exception to that. So really the explanation that we can only give him was that the committee officials here did their best to make contact with Frank Cushnahan, and that was the only way that they were able to do that. And unless Kevin wants to elaborate any more, but all we can really do is explain to him what actually happened, and verify on behalf of the committee that we were trying to contact him, and that was the best means of contact, the only means of contact, in fact.
Chair, Mr. Cushnahan sits on a number of boards of committees, or certainly has done. I know it refers to having said I think it was on a committee in relation to the OFN DFM, but we were told when we contacted that office that he no longer sat in that particular committee. When we contacted NAMA, we were told that if we were to send the letter on to him, then they would ensure that he received it. There has been a little bit of sort of private investigation work trying to find addresses for witnesses who belong to previous organisations, and for example, Chair, we're going through the Housing Executive to get those ex-employees here. So we thought it was a reasonable approach. Mr. Cushnan was concerned because I think he feels that the letter was opened, but we had been advised by the secretary of NAMA, I think it was the lady's called Elaine Hudson, that she would take care of that on our behalf. And maybe we should have given more thought to that, but it was really to expedite matters for the committee that we did so.
I mean, our members content to be in genuine attempt to contact them. There was no malice intended. More than happy to formally apologise for inconvenience to them on behalf of the committee. Members are content to do that. I mean, I think it's fair to say that you had a pretty positive conversation with them at the end of the conversation.
Yes, sorry, I should have mentioned that, Chair. I spoke to Mr. Cushnan last Friday. He called, and it's fair to say he was quite irate at the manner in which he had been contacted. The letter had been then forwarded to him, as we were told it would be. And but I tried to explain the process that we'd gone through, and he said he would deliver the letter on Thursday, which he did so, and I said I would just make sure that the committee was aware of it, and that they would respond to him after Thursday's meeting. But yes, the conversation was cordial.
Okay. Okay, so members content then, we write apologising for the inconvenience
It's
caused.
a bit unusual, Chairman, though. Normally in a circumstance like that, forwarding mail is just forwarded on to the person if they know what the forwarding address is, unopened.
Yeah.
That would be the usual procedure that would be adopted.
Yes. That would have been certainly our understanding, Kevin's understanding of what would have happened. Yeah.
Yes.
There's not much we can do about it.
Okay. Okay, members, thank you for that. And moving on then to item 5, then that's the inquiry business on this morning. You're aware we have Mr. Stephen Brimstone, the DSD Special Advisor, and the papers you have are on page 13. And obviously this section this morning is in respect of phase 3 of the committee's inquiry. I formally invite Stephen to the table. And as is the norm, whenever we invite people to give evidence to the inquiry, we notify them on what basis we want to invite them and provide them with any relevant material, assist them in their preparation, and we also invite them, if they so wish, to present a written submission to the committee, which in this case obviously Stephen has done, and that's included on page 15 of your pack. So Stephen, are you happy? First of all, members have the pack, have the submission in front of you. Stephen, you're happy enough you've presented the submission to the committee. Is there any opening remarks you want to make, or anything additional you want to say, or you know the routine is entirely at your discretion if you wish to make any other points before we would open up to members of the committee. Jim Allister, then from McCann.
Good morning, Mr. Brimstone. Who decided that you would make contact with Jenny Brimstone or with Jenny Palmer on the 1st of July 2011?
My recollection of events at that time was that it had been discussed with the Minister as an appropriate next step. He wanted to ensure that the board were adequately informed of his position, and he felt we became aware that the party had a councillor who sat on the board, and he felt it was appropriate to make contact with Councillor Palmer.
So as we're clear, it was you and the Minister together and no one else who decided that Mrs. Palmer would be contacted?
Yes.
When was that decision made?
I can only assume that it was in the week leading up to the phone call on the 1st of July.
We know that during that week there had been a sequence of events, including meetings with the housing executive, etc., and that the department, or the Minister rather, were forming a view that they would like the contract extended and all of that, and ultimately it was getting to the point where the Minister was even considering an Article 10 direction. That was sort of the direction of travel on the subject matter, yes?
Yes, the Minister was considering his options, yes.
Yes. And in that context, then, you and the Minister, may not terribly matter, but was it your idea or his to contact Mrs. Palmer?
listen, it's over 3 years ago. I can't recall the specifics around who said what and when to who first. It was discussed and it was decided this would be an appropriate step to take.
And how was she then to be contacted?
Well, I didn't actually have any contact details for Councillor Palmer.
So how did you get those?
I had never met Councillor Palmer before. Councillor Alan Urt, I had his contact details. He sat on the Lisburn City Council along with Councillor Palmer. So I would have contacted Councillor Alan Urt to ask for Councillor Palmer's contact details.
Well, Mrs. Palmer told us that the phone call from you came in on Mr. Urt's phone. Was that your first contact? Did you just coincidentally happen to ring him up and say, I'm looking for Jenny Palmer's details, and he said, well, she's with me?
Yes.
That's literally how it happened?
Yes.
You had no knowledge they were together?
No, not at all.
Okay. And why were you contacting her?
The Minister had grown concerns that his views around the handling of the contracts by the Housing Executive were not being accurately and entirely reflected by the then Chairman to the wider board. They had no assurance that if the Red Sky contracts were passed to adjacent contractors, automatically post the decision of the board before any work could be done to ensure the same issues were not prevalent with the other contractors. In his view, a bad situation with regard to the Housing Executive could be made even worse. The Minister was not in any way suggesting that the Red Sky contracts, at that point being delivered by Red Sky administration, should not be terminated early, but rather should only be terminated when there was appropriate level of assurance that the adjacent contractors who would automatically get the Red Sky contracts did not have the same issues as Red Sky had, as had been demonstrated in the ASM Harris report. Minister became aware that the party had a councillor who was one of the 4 political appointees on the board of the Housing Executive, and that was Councillor Palmer. It was discussed and the Minister felt it would be useful for me to contact Councillor Palmer to ensure that she was fully aware of his concerns ahead of the special board meeting on the 5th of July, and that she could ensure that his concerns were accurately reflected to the wider board at the meeting on the following Tuesday, and I undertook to contact Councillor Palmer.
You've just read that to us from something you pre-prepared? Yes.
Well, I was coming to this committee and I prepared what I thought would be questions that the committee may present.
So, this meeting of the 5th of July, when had it been arranged?
The Minister only became aware, and officials only became aware of it that last week in June, from my recollection.
Is Jenny Palmer an honest person?
I have no reason to... I'm sorry, I can't answer that question, Chair. I'm unsure.
Whether she's honest or dishonest?
Chair, I'm unsure if I am in a position to answer that question.
Yeah, I think it's actually an unfair question, Jim, because you're asking.
Well, was she honest when she told this committee, as she told the BBC, that during the course of that conversation, that you told her that there's no point in her being on the board of the Housing Executive unless she was prepared to do what the party needed her to do? You do what you're told, the party comes first. Was she being honest when she told this committee that language to that effect was used by you in that conversation?
Chair, I have no recollection of using language to that effect in the phone call with
What
the
have
Councillor.
you recollection of?
I'm happy to go into that now if you My best recollection of an event, of a phone call that lasted from 5-6 minutes over 3 years ago, and the event, and amongst everything else that was happening. I called Councillor Alan Urt, who sat, and again I've made notes of this so I can, as best, reflect to the committee my best recollection.
When did you make the notes? Not at the time.
No, not at the time, no.
Right.
No. I called Councillor Alan Urt, who sat on Lisburn City Council with Councillor Palmer on the Friday morning before the Tuesday board meeting, to ask for contact details for Councillor Palmer. He happened to be in an event with Councillor Palmer and suggested I could speak to her there and then. I had no issue, and he passed the phone to Councillor Palmer. I introduced myself and the role that I was in the department with Nelson McCausland. I had never met Councillor Palmer before, and I assumed that she didn't know anything about me either. I outlined the issue with regard to the Red Sky contract, including some of the allegations that have been made publicly. But in light of the special board meeting that we had been made aware of that was going to happen the next week, at which the board would vote on terminating the Red Sky contract, the Minister wanted me to brief her on his concerns and asked if she could reflect his concerns to the board in full and accurate fashion. The Minister did not have confidence in the then Chairman to accurately reflect his position and his concerns on the handling of contracts by both senior management and the Chairman of the board to the wider board. He believed that he had received no convincing assurance from the Chairman that the Red Sky issues were not prevalent with other contractors, and in particular the adjacent contractors who would automatically get the Red Sky contracts post their termination if the board voted that way. I outlined, from my recollection, how Minister wanted a clear and transparent tendering exercise, as had been indicated in writing to the Chairman, which would also allow time to get assurance that the same Red Sky issues were not happening with other contractors as well. There was no issue with terminating the Red Sky contract early due to the issues identified, but Minister wanted the termination to take place when there could be some degree of assurance that the new contract could be properly delivered. To date, he had not been given any evidential-based assurance by the then Chairman. Councillor Palmer, from my recollection, became very defensive regarding the then Chairman and strongly contested any suggestion he was not carrying out his duties appropriately. Councillor Palmer went on to tell me about her role in the board's audit subcommittee, and that in her view all the fault lay with Red Sky. The issues were solely limited to Red Sky, and the management of the Northern Ireland Housing Executive was appropriately managing the response maintenance contracts. I responded by asking about Leeway Maintain, another response maintenance contractor in Belfast, who the Housing Executive internal audit department were raising concerns about, concerns regarding overcharging, etc., same issues as Red Sky. Councillor Palmer refused to accept this. I again asked that she reflect the Minister's concerns to the board. She said she couldn't do this. I believe the phone call ended after this point, and I did not pursue the issue with Councillor Palmer any further.
You said all that to her on the phone?
That's my recollection of what happened during the phone call.
Just a wee second. I mean, first of all, I just want to move on another member just after this, but I want to make everybody has a chance in the earlier part of this. But can I say to you, Stephen, that you provided a written submission to the committee. You're here to give evidence and ask questions from members. So a moment ago, and I'm just drawing this to your attention, you had said in response to questions from Jim that you couldn't remember who initiated or whose idea was that you would contact Jenny Palmer, and then you read a submission saying it was from the Minister. Could I ask you to, I mean, you've given us a submission, but you're here to answer members directly, so could I ask you to do your best to answer without having to read out lengthy scripts? Because that's not...
Apologies, Chair, I was trying to fully articulate the recollection.
Clearly there's differences in what we're hearing. So.
Did you, in terms, tell Jenny Palmer that you wanted her to go against the existing decision of the board and extend the contracts? Did you tell her that?
No, my recollection of the conversation is that I asked on behalf of the Minister that she reflect his concerns to the board.
So you didn't say to her, we need you to do that in terms of voting against the present position of the board?
I have no recollection of saying that to Councillor.
And you didn't say to her that the party comes first?
And again, whilst I can't remember every phrase that I used during a conversation, a 4 or 5 minute conversation that happened over 3 years ago, I have no recollection of using that phraseology to Councillor Palmer either.
What about you do what you're told?
Again, I'll go back to the previous answer. I don't recollect using that phraseology to Councillor Palmer.
Could you have used it?
No, I don't believe in the context of the call and what we were actually looking.
Did you say to her, otherwise there's no point in you being on the board if you're not prepared to do what we asked you to do?
I've no recollection of using that phraseology to Councillor.
Councillor Palmer has a very clear recollection of you using that terminology, isn't that right?
Well, I haven't seen the answer, but I believe that she made a comment along those lines both to the BBC programme and the committee last
Well,
week.
you know she did, don't you?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So is she being dishonest with us, in your opinion?
No, well, Chair, again, Chair, if you could rule on whether I'm here to ask questions of
You're
fact.
saying they're diametrically opposed to what she said.
I've given you my best recollection of the events as they happened at that.
She also says that at a subsequent meeting when you and she met with Mr. Robinson and others, that you acknowledged that her account was essentially accurate.
I didn't, at that meeting, acknowledge that her account was accurate.
Are you just trying to protect yourself, Mr. Brimstone?
You know, I'm trying to give honest answers to this committee in as full and frank a way as I possibly can.
Do you now acknowledge that if she is right and that you told her the party comes first and all the other things I put to you, that you would indeed be in breach of the code of conduct of a special advisor by using your position for party political purposes?
I don't accept that I used any of those.
If you would, do you accept, if what Councillor Palmer has told this committee is correct, do you accept that would put you in breach of the code of conduct?
I would need to go and look at that. I'm not.
Well, let me remind you.
Question.
Paragraph 6. Special advisers shall not use official resources for party political activity. They should act in a way which upholds the political impartiality of civil servants. They should avoid anything which might reasonably lead to this criticism that people paid from public funds are being used for party political purposes. Now, if you said to her, this is what we need you to do, the party comes first, wouldn't that be breaching?
I don't believe that I used any of those phraseologies.
If she is correct that that's what you said, do you acknowledge that would be you breaching the code of conduct?
I don't accept that I used any of that
I'm
phraseology.
not asking you to accept. I'm saying if Councillor Palmer is believed by this committee that you said that, would that put you in a position of having breached the code?
Chairman, with respect,
Right, sorry, Tommy.
the witness is
Tommy,
here to answer
Tommy
questions about what he
Sorry,
said,
Tommy.
not to give Jim
Tommy.
an interpretation
Tommy.
of the code of conduct.
Tommy.
So stop the badgering.
Tommy, hold on a second. Chairman, hold on
What
a
are you,
second.
bully?
Hold on a second.
I think we know who was bullying. all
Excuse
right.
me, folks.
Yes,
Jim
we've
and
got
Sammy
evidence of your
Wilson.
bullying. We've
Sammy
evidence-
Wilson.
Evidence of your bullying.
Sammy Wilson.
On record.
Sammy Wilson, be quiet, please, for a moment. Sorry, Jim.
Thug.
Sammy.
Oh, sorry, I must
Sammy,
say,
I'm sorry.
I have
I'm gonna
to object to that.
I really have to
You
ask you.
object, Jim?
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to ask you, somebody, to, you need to reflect on that remark. Seriously. Seriously, need to reflect on that.
Chairman,
remark. I'm asking you to reflect
transcript
on the
of
remark and
what's
then
been
let's get back to business.
reflect the way you want on it, or not.
So I'm asking you to reflect on it. I don't need to reflect on it. You need to reflect on it. And the members objected to it, in my opinion, very justifiably so. So we'll ask you to reflect on that. I'm asking you to reflect on
And
that.
after a period of reflection, what?
Well, you answer the question.
I've reflected on it.
How do you feel that,
I've
your
reflected on it,
conduct?
and
How do you
I have
feel?
observed bullying of a witness, trying to, after he has given an answer on 5 different occasions, still keeping on at it. He is here to give evidence about what he said, not to give legal interpretations of the code of conduct. And I think that to pursue a matter like that in the way which is being done is bullying behaviour, and of course I think is typical of what we can expect from somebody who has approached this, as I have said on many occasions, has come to this not with an open mind but with a conclusion already made and seeking to ensure that that conclusion is reached.
And in the course of the conduct of this meeting, which is open to the public, you've referred to another member as a thug. That member has obviously taken exception to that, and I would think the
I take
committee would...
exception to this line of questioning, so...
You did refer to a member, and Sammy, you're long enough in the tooth, you're around long enough in these political institutions. I've
I
asked you
think,
to
Chairman, it
reflect...
was said in the political context now. I don't think there was any
Well, sorry.
attempt to say...
Gregory, I'm asking somebody to deal with this in the first instance before bringing anybody else in. It's a matter between 2 members, although it's responsible committee to take whatever decision we want to take. You're not withdrawing your remark. I want to ask Jim to reflect on that, but we don't have to deal with it this morning. We're here
I
on
can say
it.
very clearly, I've been called many things, but I take great offence to being called a thug.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, it's the first time that such intemperate language has been used in the course of this committee over 3 years.
You wounded? Hurt?
Gregory, I'm sorry. Gregory Campbell.
Maybe
Let's
Mr.
not-
Campbell wants to use the word as well. It sounds like he does.
Let's not have this meeting deteriorate any further, because as in the past, if I felt it necessary, then I would adjourn the session again if this is the way this is going to deteriorate. I'm just advising members.
And
I
Chairman,
will
you know,
not
you know,
accept-
where- you know where the deterioration started?
I will not accept language directed at other members that was used here a few minutes ago. I will not accept that from any member. And no other member around this table would expect me to, nor want me to, nor, I would like to think, allow as a committee corporate decision to happen again. So let's get back to business here. Jim
Chairman,
has...
It's not a matter of it happening again. It's a matter that it has happened.
No, I appreciate
I've
that.
been called a thug.
No, I appreciate that, and I've asked the member to reflect on that, and I'm asking the member to withdraw that. He's refused to do it yet. So I am quite prepared to suspend the meeting, because we cannot allow this committee, no matter what anybody thinks of any member around the table, we cannot allow the committee to degenerate into such intemperate language.
And Chairman,
No member around this
And
table would
Chairman,
expect
or
that.
behaviour.
do you notice the pattern here? That the only time there has ever been bullying of witnesses under your chairmanship in this committee is when either the DUP minister appeared or now a DUP advisor appears. Now, I think that says a lot about the way this inquiry is being run. And, you know, despite the fact that we've had some fairly dodgy witnesses here, I've never heard
If
this kind of bullying.
Then, sorry,
This
just a
kind of
second.
bullying
Okay,
and
I've
behaviour
given notice.
before.
I've given notice. I'm not allowing this intemperate language. I'm suspending this session of the inquiry this morning.
Until,
I'm not going to allow this
Until-
to continue. I will seek advice and I will consult, and then we will resume again.
Okay.
We're-
I hope it's not be like the
Benefit
last time
morning.
now. I hope it's not be like the last.